In this story, we're going back to an autumn afternoon in London, 1853. Victor and the Forbidden Watch. On a cold, foggy autumn day, Victor was riding his old bike, heading home. When he got to Baker Street, out of nowhere, a little black cat jumped right in front of him. He lost control, crashed into a street vendor's cart, and hit the ground hard. That was enough to send his grandfather's old pocket watch flying out of his pocket, and it broke. After that, he had no choice but to head to a small watch shop nearby to get it fixed. When Victor walked into the old watchmaker's shop, that same little black cat walked in right behind him. A bit annoyed, he said, "Your cat made me fall today and break my watch." The old man smiled and said, "It's no big deal. I'll fix it right up." Victor started looking at the watches in the display cases. As he browsed, one particular case caught his eye. Above the shelf, a small sign read, "When time sleeps, who stays awake?" Each one had a name engraved on it, and next to every watch, there was a number, just a number of days. Victor was deep in thought when the old man suddenly called out, "Sir, your watch is ready." He handed Victor a beautiful little box and said, "This one's a gift from me to make up for what my little cat did." Victor smiled, thanked him, and without opening the box, hopped on his bike and headed home. But when he got home and opened the box, his eyes went wide with surprise. The watch inside was nothing like his grandfather's. It had a shiny golden case and looked like something really expensive, way too fancy to be a simple replacement. The next day, he headed back to the watch shop, but when he got there, the place was closed. That's when curiosity got the better of him. He took another look at the watch and gave the crown a twist. Suddenly, everything around him slowed down, like really slowed down. It was as if time had almost stopped. Birds in the sky moved in slow motion, practically frozen midair. The sounds of the street turned weird and muffled, and people were walking like they were underwater. But Victor, he was moving just fine. He looked around in disbelief, fear creeping over him. He had no idea what was going on. He checked the watch. The second hand was ticking painfully slow. Then, as soon as he twisted the crown again, everything snapped back to normal. Shocked and confused, he found a seat at a nearby cafe and just sat there, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Just then, Edward, Victor's old friend, spotted him sitting at the cafe. Seeing Edward snapped Victor out of his thoughts for a bit, and they started chatting. But it didn't take long before Victor drifted back into his head and ended up telling Edward what had happened. Edward didn't believe a word of it. He figured Victor was just messing with him again, like back in their school days. Right around that moment, the sound of a crowd shouting filled the air. Victor got up to see what was going on. A man had climbed to the top of a tall building and was threatening to jump. Everyone was looking up, trying to talk him down, begging him not to do it. But suddenly he jumped. The whole crowd gasped, frozen in horror, as the man fell through the air. Victor, completely shocked, suddenly remembered the watch. Almost without thinking, he twisted the crown. Everything slowed down again. The man was now suspended mid-air, falling in slow motion. Victor looked around frantically and spotted a hay cart nearby. He quickly dragged it under where the man was about to fall. Then he twisted the crown again. Time snapped back into motion, and the man landed right in the hay cart, alive. The crowd stood there, stunned at what had just happened. From that moment on, Victor became fascinated with the watch. He started discovering just how strange and powerful it really was. In the middle of a busy street, a thief snatched a woman's purse. Victor, without thinking twice, used the watch to freeze time, grabbed the purse back, and returned it to her like nothing ever happened. Another time, two drunks were blocking a lady's way in a quiet alley. Victor stopped time again and gave those creeps a proper lesson they wouldn't forget. Later that night, in a packed club, some guy was shouting and causing a scene. Victor slowed time down, loosened one of the table legs, and then let time flow again. The leg suddenly gave out. The guy crashed hard to the floor and blacked out. By the end of the day, Victor was feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. He was amazed by what the watch could do and totally forgot he was ever supposed to return it to the old man. The next morning, still looking for a new way to use the watch, Victor spotted two men selling lottery tickets. He walked over and bought one. That's when it hit him. He could use the watch's power to change the lottery results in his favor. So he did just that and won himself a nice pile of coins. He was feeling good about it, but then out of the corner of his eye, he thought he saw a shadow move quickly. He turned around, but there was nothing there. Shrugging it off, he continued walking when his eyes landed on a notice pinned to a wall. It was an ad for the government service exams offering the best job opportunities that year. The problem? The exam was that very day, and Victor was completely unprepared. He was about to give up when he suddenly remembered the watch. He headed straight to the exam hall, paid the entrance fee with his winnings, and entered the room. He had no idea what to do, so he slowed time, sneaked a peek at the other participants' papers, and copied their answers. A few days later, the results were out, and Victor, without having studied, somehow managed to score first place. Now, he could get hired anywhere. The crowd cheered him on, and he felt this overwhelming sense of victory and power. But just then, he thought he saw that same shadow again, this time right behind him. He turned around, but once again, nothing. Fear started to creep into his heart. Victor now understood how powerful the watch was, and started using it more and more for his own benefit, no longer caring about others. He started finishing his work much faster. He had more time to enjoy himself, but some nights he'd wake up in a cold sweat, having nightmares. He'd see all the people he'd wronged, like the two guys selling lottery tickets, the people he'd cheated on the exam, the thieves and drunks he'd fought, and even the police chasing after him, angry and vengeful. One day, while Victor was at the bank handling some business, a robber suddenly stormed in. Everyone panicked and started screaming. The guy fired a few shots into the air and walls, making people drop to the ground in terror. The robber got busy collecting the cash. Victor was scared too. His heart was pounding, but then he remembered he had a powerful weapon, the watch. He pulled it out, slowed time, walked over to the guy, and emptied his gun. Then he reset time back to normal. The robber, now holding an empty gun, froze in shock. With no other option, he gave up and the crowd overpowered him. Just then, Victor spotted the sack of money the thief had been filling. For a split second, temptation got the better of him. He slowed time again, snatched the bag, and rushed back home. He hid the sack full of coins, then hurried back to the bank. Time resumed, and the sack was gone. Police were checking everyone inside the bank, trying to figure out where it went, but no one suspected Victor. They let him leave. Back at home, he just sat there, staring at the sack of coins for hours. He was thrilled to have the money, but also uneasy, anxious. He kept telling himself, "It's insured. No one's really losing anything." But deep down, he wasn't so sure. A few days later, Victor decided it was time to do something big with the money. So, he headed over to the Central Investment Building, bought a few shares, put some cash into a couple of investment funds, and waited for the stock certificates to come through. That's when he first met Vincent Hawke, a sharp-looking, well-dressed man with a reputation as a successful investor and businessman. He owned multiple estates and was a major player in the booming railroad and real estate industries. Victor saw an opportunity and went up to him. He told Vincent he'd heard a lot about him and asked if he could get some advice on investing. Vincent, intrigued, struck up a conversation. When he found out Victor had ranked first in the civil service exam and worked in the land department, he got even more interested. He invited Victor to an upcoming banquet, a place where the city's elites, investors, and power players mingled and made deals. Victor already feeling high on luck and charm, accepted without hesitation and headed home, grinning and daydreaming the whole way.